There is.
All right, thank you, everybody. We'll try to do the back and forth here, so I'm not looking totally ignoring people. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm really excited about this. I'm very thankful. I'm thankful to have Cris join us, Cris Ippolite. Cris, I was trying to remember. I think I've known you for almost 20 years now, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a long time. So
math I've come up with as well.
Okay, so he is a very well-known speaker in our kind of area. He's presented for years at our National Developers Conference, and he's got a whole series of online training videos and things that he does. I think the best part about Cris, oh, sorry, I don't want to steal his slides. He is a Wisconsin native, but he's also a Green Bay Packers season ticket holder who manages to make it back to Lambeau, hopefully several times during the upcoming year.
Yes, sir. There's 3 so far.
So, I mean, I think the key thing here, I've known Cris for a long time. I think this is an area where I've followed what he's been talking about for a while regarding AI, and so I'm really excited to have him kind of share his his knowledge base and some of his information with us. I think it'll be really beneficial. So, with that being said, it's all you.
Thank you so much. I, again, really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to everybody. As far as the style of our conversation here, I have slides that I'm going to speak to, but I'll do my best to keep my eyes on the chat as well. But feel free to chime in, any questions, any thoughts. You can either take notes, we can talk at the end, or just in line. I'm happy to do that. I've got a little bit of flexibility in the agenda, so if we end up kind of, off-ramping on one of the topics, I'm happy to do that. And in general, before I get into just a little introduction and how I even got introduced to these concepts myself, I just want to say off the top that my tone is, what I really hope that everybody comes away with this, I should say, is that there's just incredible opportunity right now. And my goal for today is to shine some light on really what the things are to think about, what some of the things are that might be a bit of mirages and maybe not to be too concerned about, but definitely some of the stuff to be focusing on. And I spend a lot of time on thinking about what's next, and I promise to share with you what I believe is coming next and what I think some of the new applications within business are going to be within AI that are coming next as well too. So hopefully everybody gets a lot out of that. And the other aspect of it is my focus today is primarily for business. Of course, that's the context of this group, but also that's where I spend all my time. I pretty much just talk to business leaders and decision makers about AI and what they can do with it within their business and give them things to think about. So I'm particularly excited to have all of you here today for this discussion. So first, a very brief, just only because it provides context into why I'm even here talking about this, but and also talks a little bit about how, and frankly, how I know Paul and Vanessa so well and for so long. We have overlap not only in our primary careers of having done FileMaker Pro work, which is important because that's been custom business applications, in my case in particular, custom business applications for businesses of all sizes. And I also have an overlap in sports, which is where I would dare say that Paul and Vanessa are the only people that I know in both of my lives. Now all 3, actually, I should say. We used to meet up at the MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference many times out at MIT. And the reason that's relevant to today's discussion is that's actually what my personal introduction to machine learning was in the first place. About 12, 13 years ago or so, I literally, as a hobbyist, I was playing, and forgive me, fantasy sports. And I was just trying to find a way that I could beat my friends and family at fantasy football, of all things. And what I found was I ran into limitations within the platform that I was using to try to create a custom application. And that's what made me discover the need for machine learning. And so ultimately, throughout a course of events, I partnered up with a gentleman who I met over at MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference back in 2011 or so. And he and I ultimately ended up doing a paper together in 2013 on using machine learning to provide predictive outcomes for players for the purposes of fantasy sports. Shortly after that, I went on to, even though I still had my day job with FileMaker, I really dove into the machine learning space and ended up being a radio show personality on Sirius Fantasy Sports for 2 years, doing football discussions as it pertains to machine learning, and then later went on to work for the NFL for 3 years as well, where I was doing what we called analytics at the time. We used to call it an algorithm, then it was called analytics, and the whole time it's just been machine learning all the way through. So I'm still actively involved in machine learning as it pertains to sports and fantasy sports in particular. As a matter of fact, we have a ChatGPT plugin on that same brand that's coming out later this month, as a matter of fact. So kind of relevant to what we're talking about. But what that made me realize about 10 years ago is that machine learning is this incredible tool that all businesses have opportunities to make use of. In particular, in our world where we're building custom applications, so we have a clientele that has an attitude about their data where they understand that there's value there and that it can be changed, and it's not just something that is a commodity so they can buy some off-the-shelf tool like everybody else in their space. So really what I started doing was building custom models as a service and integrating them in with business applications. That, of course, led me to doing a lot of work with API-driven machine learning integrations, which was perfect timing because right around 2020, when I was really searching around for a lot of pre-trained models online, like, at the time you could do like classification and summary and keyword extraction, some pretty basic, AI type tasks. I caught wind of this thing that ultimately ended up changing my life completely. And I hope you guys have the same positive experience with it as I do. I learned of the initiative at OpenAI because in 2020, they released the GPT-3 for public access. And it hit me at a perfect time, probably kismet. I had a 10-day think week that my wife was nice enough to let me go venture out for 10 days into the wild and just like catch up on reading for work and do some experiments. Well, 2 days before that, I was one of the first people to get the OpenAI beta keys for API, and then my life changed forever. And so most of us, of course, have been introduced to this concept. Not necessarily making assumptions on present company, but just as a population worldwide, we all learned of this thing that has now sort of been labeled AI or generative AI, or they're language models. When ChatGPT was released in November, it was actually November 30th. It's about 6 months or so, which is crazy to think how much this has been part of our lives. So that's been my journey. Right now, I primarily just work with AI integrations, custom AI implementations. We still do a lot of machine learning models integrated with AI. And when I use the term AI moving forward, I'm going to really be describing language models with a little bit of a focus mainly on the OpenAI GPT-3 model, which is the same model that is the back end of ChatGPT with reference to ChatGPT experiences. But you'll see later in the presentation that there's a ton of different models that do similar types of things that I want to introduce you to. So this is where I want to start. First of all, I sort of have in my mind what I believe business leaders should be thinking about as it pertains to AI, but I want to start with what you really shouldn't be, I don't think, spending too much time worrying and thinking about. And it has a lot to do with how information on AI is being presented to us in just sort of like, I don't want to say like the media, but how we're actually getting our information. So here's a perfect example of this that I wanted to share with all of you. This is a Goldman Sachs paper that came out in March 26th. This is a really seminal paper that Goldman Sachs released specifically about the potential effects of artificial intelligence on economic growth. And once that hit, it made headlines everywhere. Let me show you a couple of the headlines. You may have seen some of these. AI will replace equivalent of 3 million jobs. Sounds scary. ChatGPT, which was not even mentioned in the paper, by the way, could threaten 300 million jobs around the world. Yikes, scary. And then more, AI could replace 300 million workers, and the most at-risk professions aren't what you expect. Like all this fear-mongering and terror, and The reality of it was, what was actually in this paper that I consumed every page of, I found it to be very informative. There was no mention whatsoever of job loss at all. As a matter of fact, the only time the number 300 million was actually mentioned was they were referencing that it would more likely that jobs would be complemented rather than substituted. They're actually making the opposite statement, that they believe that there'd be embellishments to professional services rather than replacements. Now, I'm not saying there won't be job loss. There certainly have been, but that's not really the primary purpose of at least this paper. They also mentioned a lot of reference to historical offsets with technological advancements. I mean, just look at the internet. I think we've all lived through that and saw the impact and the job growth, the job opportunities that have been created. And by mobile and cloud, these are the same types of emergence of technology. And I thought a really interesting stat that was actually pointed on this paper that didn't make it into any of these news articles was 60% of the current workforce, the jobs that we all have today, well over half, didn't even exist in 1940. So pre-industrial, or not pre-industrial revolution, but like pre-World War, in our World War eras, let's call it. The other parts that the paper mentioned that I had a really hard time finding any mention of anywhere was that AI, Goldman Sachs indicates through their economic research that AI could eventually increase the global GDP by 7%. This is huge. That's a massive positive impact. And even here in the US, they predict that it will raise the annual US labor productivity growth by just about 1.5 points over a 10-year period. This is exciting. This is nothing but opportunity and exciting things to think about. So where does this come from? Where does this gap in what people are really saying about AI versus what we see on, the Leslie Stahl doing a piece on 60 Minutes about how we're all doomed? Well, it actually starts a little bit with public opinion. I thought this was a really interesting survey. This was actually back in 2022, the IPSOS survey that simply asked individuals whether they feel most positively about AI products and services, sort of a consumer level survey. Now, we could probably debate whether any survey in China is meaningful, because I think everyone's just sort of told what to say in these types of things, or maybe, however they got access to it. But they were 78% of their population, as you see in the headline to the right, feels most positively about the possibilities of these things. Saudi Arabia follows them. India also very saturated with like ChatGPT usage in these three areas. If you look down on the bottom, only 35% of Americans, so a general malaise or maybe just negative feeling about AI in general. And I think the past two slides, there's a correlation there, is I guess what I'm saying. So what I would do, instead of watching the headlines when you're thinking about what AI, the impact of AI could mean for your business, I would follow the money. And here's what I wanted to share with you. This is kind of fascinating to me. This is another report that I actually read. I didn't run it through ChatGPT and read the summaries, although it's very tempting to do that. The artificial intelligence report from just 2023 talked about private investment. So the total amount of AI private investment between 2022 and 2017, or back actually just in 2022, we just saw that China has a considerably higher public opinion of AI than the United States, but the money, we kind of lapped them by 3.5 times the investment. Here in the States, we 3.5 times more investment in AI here in the United States than in China. This is a big deal for people who are rooting for the United States and us being, the innovative leaders of the world. That type of investment is going to keep stoking those fuels. U.S. also continues to lead in terms of total number of newly funded AI companies, seeing again about 3.5 times more than anyone else. And this one actually probably tells that story even more. This is actually from just the first quarter of 2023, where a lot of VC investments are shy. This was right before SVB and a lot of the banking issues. But if you look at this chart, the VC investment in just the first quarter of 2023 for artificial intelligence dwarfed financial tech and biotech, which were the two leaders a year ago. And now their investment is both of those combined. It's actually the next three combined. So the money is very aggressively going towards AI. And sure, there's probably some buzz to it. But if you think about the individuals and the organizations, whether it be economic research, looking for the impact of new technologies, or the ones who are looking to see where growth is going to come from, all of them are unanimously moving in the direction of AI. And if that's not enough for you, I've got a couple of quotes from some individuals we should probably trust, like Mr. Bill Gates, who, by the way, I read The Road Ahead from Bill Gates a few years after he wrote it, after all the stuff he predicted actually came true almost verbatim. It was kind of eerie. But he said in his blog, The New Age of AI Has Begun, and this was just back in March, the end of March, he indicated in a quote, the development of AI is fundamental. It is as fundamental as the creation of things like the microprocessors, the internet, mobile phones, personal computer. He was around on the front lines for at least half of those. Lawrence Summers, former U.S. Secretary of Treasury, he has kind of his finger on the pulse of how the economy works. This one might be a little aggressive, but hey, he said it. AI is the most important general purpose technology since the wheel or fire. Okay, now I'm starting to think maybe that's a little aggressive, but hey, this is a person who knows, and he, made that statement in a number of cases, actually. Oh, actually, I won't even bother you with the quote, but this one's kind of interesting. This one just happened last week. At the big NVIDIA conference, and by the way, if you're looking for, a good stock from 2 weeks ago, it would have been NVIDIA and any of their suppliers. They, of course, just broke stock market history just last week with the highest one-day growth of a stock because they completely destroyed their earnings. And that's really meaningful for a reason. NVIDIA makes the processors, not the CPUs, but AI uses GPUs. So this is a different type of server technology that runs AI. And here's why that's a big deal. I'm going to take you back in history to when the internet first came out. A lot of you who were in business at the time probably remember it took us a good 5 or 7 years when the hype was happening to when the web really landed on what people were promising. And that really was because of a major bottleneck, which was the cable companies actually having to lay pipe and wires to actually get internet to as many businesses, consumers as possible. And they're still trying to do that. We have satellites actually doing that now. Well, the opposite is happening in AI. What NVIDIA was actually coming out with was saying, we now have the processors to do everything that everybody wants to do. And Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, made a comment not too long ago, actually in a sort of a secret closed door meeting that got leaked just last week. He even reiterated our number one blocker for their GPT-5 training is the availability of GPUs. Even Elon Musk went and sort of behind the doors, bought up all the possible available GPUs you could, because he's starting up a new AI startup called X.AI that I guarantee you will be hearing a lot about in a year's time. So the race isn't so much the training and the compute intelligence of these models, but actually like the compute to run them. And now NVIDIA came in last week and said, we got you guys, we're good there. So this is all pointing in, these are all force multipliers towards even more growth than what we're seeing right now. So pause moment, any questions on any of that, or thoughts or comments or anything similar to add? And again, happy to take questions at the end as well. But now I want to just give you guys something to focus on. So these are a couple of things that when talking to business leaders, I find these to be important points to share. So the first of it is the tech is already there. And I'll mention this a little bit later, but I'll tell you what I mean by the tech that as it pertains to business. What I'm not talking about today is using ChatGPT to write emails for you, or poems, or ad copy, or LinkedIn posts. All that's fine. Don't get me wrong. I'm not making a pejorative statement by any means. I'm just saying that's not the power of AI that I'm talking about. I'm talking about extracting latent intelligence from data and insights at superhuman levels of being able to provide insights, and predictive analytics and complex thinking and reasoning that is available within these models that has nothing to do with generating text at all. I promise you that's where the real opportunities are, and I'll get to some of those examples. So in general, the tech is where it needs to be, and let me show you a demonstration of that. GPT-4, which is OpenAI's large language model, that's the fourth version, the most current version of their GPT model. And GPT-4 just came out very recently, and one of the things that they talked about was they did about 6 months of testing before they released it to the wild, and a lot of it, what they were trying to do is determine how intelligent it was. And in addition to having to take like every professional test it could find, this is what this chart is that you're looking at. If you can see across the bottom, these are some of the exams that maybe some of you have taken. There are things in here like the LSATs and GREs and SATs and AP, everything you can imagine. The blue line are the percentile lower bound of the test results. So like, for example, the blue line indicates that on the very far right with the AP Environmental Science, GPT 3.5, the 3.5, the .5 predecessor to GPT-4, passed the test in, a better than 80+% of the other test takers, right? The green lines are GPT-4. So the improvement in just a half a model training, first of all, the blue lines are impressive enough. If you look at some of these tests that the model itself can pass, they literally do what's called zero shot, just ask it the question and it gives the answer. It's pretty insane to see that level of intelligence, but the green line is even crazier. So just in that 1/2 version leap, it got that much more intelligent. Then it got even more intelligent. I'm going to show you, there's this one called a human eval, which is a Python coding test. It got a 67% in just straight up asking questions and answering. And then it applied this technique, which is called reflection, which is kind of insane. So one of the things that GPT-4 really improved upon was being able to ask the model, hey, that thing I just asked you to do, are you sure you did it right? And then it reflects upon itself, which is actually kind of crazy if you think about that. And then it goes, oh no, you know what, you're right. Actually, let me take another pass at that. Here is the correct job that I should have done. When it applied that to just this one test I showed you, it went from 0.67 to a 0.88. So it got better score with the reflection involved in the questions, which is essentially like telling test taker humans to go, give it another pass on your questions before you turn it in. So that's a pretty significant feature. And this video that I'm showing you here is really just for a visual, but what's happening in the background, this is one of the most recent advancements in language model AI. This is what's called recursive agents. This particular one is called Auto GPT. This was like kind of a thing that was going on. It's not a new product. It's not a new model. It's just a technique that one person did and then it went really viral. But it really leans in on two things: giving the model some memory where it can actually store things, giving it access to the internet, which all the models have access to the internet and can be as relevant as up to the minute information. But then what it did is it gave it a task. In this case, it's kind of a fun task. It said, go find the next big event on the calendar. And we want you're a chef. It's called Chef GPT. Go find the next event, which happened to be Easter at this time, and go put together a menu of a bunch of stuff that might be fun to serve. And so you can see some of the stuff in here. If you notice where it says like criticism or thoughts or reasoning, what this approach does is you write this big long document that says, this is who you are, you're Chef GPT. These are the tools that you have available to you. You can search the internet, you can go to this database, you can go to this API, and all these are at your disposal. And here's what we want you to do. We want you to go find the events, go find some things to serve, and then go get the ingredients, come back with the shopping list. And now it's using that reflection to do some recursion and just keep going and going and going. So it's literally, you give it a command and then it has this super intelligence to say, okay, well, that means I should probably go check and find this. I should go look at this as well. And I should go look at the next thing. And then once I find those, I'll go do this other thing. So it doesn't even need us at the controls, even as of today, to be able to, keep telling it what to do. It can run autonomously. Now, of course, there's more news about how this will destroy the world made the headlines than, some of the really interesting things they can do in business. And I can promise you, we've implemented this technology within business, even in subtle ways, and it is so powerful and so impactful and completely has safety guardrails available to it. And you can stop it from doing things you don't want it to do just as much as you can tell it and give it agency to do what it wants. So this is a concept of agents and doing some of that recursion. Extremely powerful. This is one of the more interesting things that's happening in AI. The other part that I promised you about what I'm really focusing on, and Paul, if I haven't given you all the links, I'll make sure to do it after this. But one of the papers that I recently put up on Medium was this one called Large Language Models Beyond Text Generation, unleashing the power of reasoning. I'm not going to get into it today, but I've spent a lot of time on the language model's ability to perceive others, and this whole concept of theory of mind. If any of you have any psychology background, you'll be familiar with the concept of theory of mind. But the level of reasoning that it has, and that reasoning is important because it introduces logic at orders of magnitude above regular coding, and allows it to take perspectives of others and be able to reflective upon, you can say, hey, what does this person think of this person, or this persona think of this person, or hey, look at all this data, give us some insights, but I want you to give me insights that are meaningful to this type of individual or this type of user of your system. The level at which it can perform is absolutely amazing. This is what I spend all my time on. This is what I really believe businesses can leverage and make, big impact, anything from small impacts to really huge, significant differentiating impacts, focusing on reasoning, complex thinking, and the ability to extract latent intelligence from your existing business data. So nowhere do you see writing ad copy and emails, all that's fine, but I really want to urge you to not, if you're thinking about having a strategy for AI, which you absolutely should, don't think so much about those things. Instead, think about some of these other really powerful things. And the fact that not a lot of people are aware of these makes them opportunities, right? So a couple other things to focus on is that GPT, the one that I've focused on so far, is not the only model. As a matter of fact, these are all the language models that are available out in the wild. All of them have APIs. Some of them have varying different levels of commercial license, but these are all the ones that exist. There's a ton of them. And so really what that means is there's a model for every use case. Some of the general big box ones like the OpenAI, Google ones, the OpenAI / Microsoft, they're the same entity basically as it pertains to this, can do all sorts of things, but there are also some out there that are like specific to law or, biomedical or finance. So really you should understand that it's not, one size fits all. There are a ton of different models, and in some of our implementations, we'll have one piece of it hitting one model and another piece hitting another model. Like there's definitely different ways to fit the right type of technology to the outcomes that you desire. The other thing that's actually fascinating is probably the most recent advancement that I think should be headline news is the fact that there are such things as open source language models. So the OpenAI model is not available to download and install, behind your firewall for use within your business, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens that you can. And many of them are more powerful, and specifically in certain types of areas. This is what's called the Hugging Face Open LLM leaderboard. Large language model is what the LLM is. And the leaderboard means that they're taking it upon themselves to take all these new open source models and run them through. You look at the #1 test, if you see over on the right-hand side, the A12 reasoning challenge. This is what matters to people who know the capabilities of these things, are its ability to reason. It actually is a common sense test here as well, too, which is meaningful when it's interacting with humans. And then the text model's multitasking capabilities, and then it also does a truthful Q&A test as well. And then it ranks all the different models. So how do these models become open source? Well, Meta, who's Facebook, released one to the wild. They released Llama. It sounds like it's a zoo, news headline or something, but they had a model called Llama. They released it. And they released it without commercial license, but just for research and experiment, which is really smart because they basically they've made their engineering group, exponential. And they did not release what's called the weights and balances. That's kind of the cipher to the code. Then like 3 days later, someone somehow conspicuously released the weights and balances, which now meant that people can make their own models out of Llama. So a lot of these that you see here, you can even see that Llama is on here at very different sizes. Even alpaca, which the names of these are tongue-in-cheek, these are nerds having fun, certainly is based on Llama. A lot of these are based on Llama. The point of all this to take away from, besides having heard me say Llama like 5 times, is that you can actually have a language model that runs securely behind your firewall within your own stack. And they're very powerful too, especially if you use the technique, which I would suggest that you do, which is not do the zero shot, ask it to do all the stuff for you, but to integrate your own data, put your data in between the users and their tasks and their requests and the language models, which means that the truth comes from your data, not this corpus of training. And then therefore you're relying on the language models to just do the reasoning, the insights, the complex thinking, and really the superpowers that it's best at. So additionally, there's a lot of growth in the AI space. There's this is actually a McKinsey report that this came out in December, but McKinsey was talking about how the number of companies that are adopting AI between 2022 and 2017, doubled in the 5 years since 2017, which, by the way, 2017 is technically when large language models became a thing. Google, not OpenAI, released a paper called "Attention is All You Need," where they disclosed this concept of transformers. I won't get into all the weeds of the tech, but that is the proclamation that led to the concept of all these language models just a few years later that were publicly available. So since then, the proportion of companies that are adopting it has doubled, and they've been reporting meaningful cost decreases and revenue increases. Additionally, this report just came out May 17th, the state of connected operations. This is specific to like physical operations, but I found that this was an interesting part of their survey. This was actually a survey of 1,500 C-suite executives, presidents, vice presidents, and directors at organizations that manage physical operations across 9 different countries. And the respondents indicated that 85% of the respondents indicated that they plan to use generative artificial intelligence by 2024. So within the next 12 months or fewer, while only 5% reported that they don't have any plans at all to do it. So, and then in just 2 years, 1 in 6 operation employees are predicted to be doing jobs that don't exist today based on this technology. So what that means is, if your competitors have not emerged with their AI play yet, they're probably thinking about it. And within a year, most people will be deploying and utilizing these and differentiating within their space. So the opportunity window is still here. We're on the precipice of it, but no time to waste. The other part is too, I guess talking about the economy has become sort of a politics thing, but wherever you are on it, I mean, I hope there's not going to be a recession, but it certainly seems like austerity measures are something that everybody's thinking about in the current business climate, and it's probably responsible to do so. So really, what's more important than ever is to how do we do more with less? And I'm not necessarily proud of it, but a lot of the AI implementations that we've done so far in 2023, specifically at enterprise, a couple of cases at enterprise levels, we were able to do jobs that were unfortunately, they had to do layoffs because of their economic situation. And now we've been able to keep the wheels moving because of artificial intelligence. Now, I'm not going to tell you how I feel about it personally for when those jobs are ready to be filled again, and they're currently being done at much higher efficiency, but we're business leaders here. So I think the idea is where we can see gains and productivity gains and efficiencies in our progress and higher revenue, and do more with the human staff that we have at our disposal. This is probably the big takeaway, though. This is actually a problem that I run into myself, and also business leaders run into as well. And that is that, the technology has been around for 5 years. I told you about that before. But really, it's been in the developer community and the builder community for like 3. And so what that means is all that emergence of AI that you saw before has gobbled up most of the capable talent. And so the AI talent is particularly shallow. The pool is particularly shallow. So I'll give some advice as to how to maybe suss out whether or not you've got workers within your business already that may have some skills in this area that you can nurture. But if you have people who who you're talking to about doing this, you should engage them now, because honestly, my prediction is by the end of summer, there will be businesses awakening to, oh my God, we have to do something, and they're going to look around and they're not going to be able to find a talent for hire, or organizations for hire, for contracting that are going to be able to have the bandwidth to do this for them. So that isn't the case right now, but it is definitely coming within weeks and months. I promise you that that's probably going to be the bigger of the issues. Not compute, not language model capabilities, not the ability to do it safely and responsibly. It's actually who's going to do it. So one of the techniques I've done, by the way, is actually offered to teach a free prompt engineering course for a Bay Area tech university in the first quarter of this year. So I could be introduced to about a dozen coders from other disciplines that now I got free pickings on to be able to work here on our development projects. That one might have saved me, honestly, with our workload. So something to be aware of. And that's not unique. There's a bunch of numbers that came out in the AI intelligence report about the increase in looking for these skills. I've seen the job postings for prompt engineering completely spike over the last couple of months. And frankly, this happened. Interesting trivia, during the Industrial Revolution, the existing education system that we know of as trade schools actually was born out of the Industrial Revolution and the lack of anybody that understood the technology. So specifically in the UK, this was this was like an epidemic type issue for them. The state funded these actual trade universities and skill universities just so that they could have talent catch up with the tech. And that has become what we know of as the MSOEs and the trade universities that people gain these skills from, which, was kind of interesting. Something similar is probably afoot right now. So a lot of coders are looking in this direction. There might still be some trepidation based on the unknown. The AI talents are really just understanding things that have been around for a while, like understanding Python and some level of compute. And these are all things that existed before the language models came around. So there's hope for the future, but I would say in 2023 and early 2024, I would be more, and it might sort of be too late in some regards after that point, I would be more concerned about locking down, capable hirees and vendors for these purposes. So you guys get the idea there. So what do we do? So what do we do to take advantage of this, or I hope that what you're responding to is the opportunity tone here rather than the fear-mongering tone. So I want to just focus on what I think you should do within your organizations. And the first thing is, I think it's fair to have a drop everything meeting within your organizations and just say, hey, everybody, conference room Monday morning. Let's talk about this. Let's just kind of get a general idea how everybody feels about this. And more importantly, find out if anybody, you might have somebody that's a weekend warrior AI person right within your midst, and you don't even realize this. That, I think, is the most important reason to sort of take, inventory on everybody's thought process. The other part is, and I'll be honest, you also want to get the temperature as to whether some people feel maybe jobs might be at risk, or there's certain levels of productivity that might be, you might need two people to do the work of three or whatever it is. You probably want to get on top of these things from a managerial level sooner than later, because your goal would be to make the best use out of the humans that you have at your disposal now, whether it means reassignment or doing some other things, or just raising expectations from a productivity standpoint. That's from a personnel standpoint. Then it's really about it's really time to, one of the core principles for business is write a business plan. And then probably even more important is continue to iterate on that business plan. And it's probably very healthy to do so every year at least, or as often as you can. And I would say now is a really important time to do that exercise. Really take inventory on, get down to your business's first principles. What got us here in the first place? And, ask yourself, how different are your competitors' offerings from the ones that you're offering? And, what is it that makes you special? Because there could be a commoditization. Actually, there is a commoditization of general knowledge. And if in fact your differentiator at your organization is disseminating knowledge that people can get elsewhere, I would maybe, be thinking about other differentiators in that space. But if there's something that makes your organization special, your approach, some proprietary intelligence or data that you have that no other groups have, access to. These are the things that are going to become even more valuable moving forward. So now's a really good time to take inventory on these things and really lean in on those. And that's what I'm referring to when you see moat. This is like a big VC thing that they say, but the moat just basically means, if you haven't heard that before, as I'm sure you have, it's just like what makes me special and what gives me a little bit of, space in between my competitors. Just assume that if access to information is your business model, think about how you're going to be the only one doing that in a certain way, because soon everyone will have the same access. Actually, right now, technically, everyone has the same access to all information. So that's going to certainly have a trickle effect. And this is sort of the same thing before. This is kind of interesting. Only 1 in 10 employees use AI skills at work. Bosses want to change that. Those are the smart bosses, not the ones who are banning it or whatever. And by the way, you hear about bans and Apple banning and all that. They're specifically talking about ChatGPT. And I agree with that, because when you put your business intelligence and trade secrets into ChatGPT, it's storing them in their servers, and it is using some of that for training. It should be no surprise that they're storing the information, because on the left-hand side of the screen, for those of you that have used ChatGPT, you can see all your past conversations. So they're obviously storing those, but their policy is to use it as training. If you might not notice there's little thumbs up, thumbs down next to all the responses. You can actually interact with it. That's why there's a free version, because they're getting free labeling or free human reinforcement to the models, and that's what makes the new models. So when you do feedback and you put some of that information in there, they are in fact using that strictly for training purposes. So that data becomes part of the new model. So when Apple said a couple of weeks ago, everybody stopped putting, basically our new VR headset information into ChatGPT, they just didn't want OpenAI to have information. And that was smart, frankly. But even Sam Altman said, when he was in front of the Senate hearings a couple of weeks back, he was asked about this, and he made it clear, and this is pretty widely known within the professional services for AI community. He made it clear that the APIs, which is how you should be integrating language models into your systems anyways, not through ChatGPT, but they are not storing that information. So all that you have the same concerns there about, the data, is it secure, is it being transferred? It's the same thing if you're connecting to the QuickBooks Online API, for example. This is sensitive information. Is it secured as it's being transferred? That's up to you and the security of your systems to make sure that's the case. If you have grave concerns, like some of our clients have proprietary data that they just have policies that it cannot be outside their firewall, then that's where those open source language models come into play that I was talking about before. Keep everything behind the wall inside the stack, and in most cases, you'll be able to get the same functionality as some of the big box ones. Real simple comment, make note of what your competitors are doing, and if it doesn't seem like they're doing anything, just assume they are. That's probably a safe bet. And figure out what you might be able to do. It doesn't have to be some big announcement that you're making to your customers about, oh, we have chat inside our whatever now. It's how you're utilizing them within your own organization and getting some of these benefits to continue to increase your moat, so to speak. At the very least, upgrade your desktop software. I can't with good conscience recommend any of our AI clients to use tools that don't have some level of AI intelligence or integration built into it. At the very least, I would say go check out, and yes, I'm a Microsoft partner, but I'm not a reseller, so you can take that for what it's worth. But I would strongly recommend going and checking out Microsoft's new offerings. They are absolutely the front runner for business. In this case, a lot of people talked about Apple's conspicuous lack of any mention of AI, but remember, all their money comes from consumers, and they leverage machine learning probably better than anybody does from a consumer product standpoint. But Microsoft's all about business, and they are all in on this. And Google is doing their best to keep up, and probably not doing that great of a job. But at the very least, investigate the 365 with all the Copilot integrations, and the way that they bring all the business intelligence into one single source of truth, and then allow that to be available throughout all their products. Definitely check it out. I say that that's the least organizations can do to leverage AI. That at least gives you a different relationship with your own business data, throughout all your users. The other part, this is kind of redundant from what I've mentioned before, but I'm going to play you a clip here in just a second from a VC who I really respect, from a podcast I'm obsessed with that I'll recommend to you guys in a second. And he's talking about the next gold rush, the next level, the real next level of the AI emergence in coming years is going to be about the use of proprietary data. So he's going to make a proclamation that I'm going to show you here about VCs where they should be looking. But if you can just take that and narrow it down to your own data within your organization and find value that way. As a matter of fact, here he is. The podcast I'm talking about is this podcast called the All In Podcast. It's a bunch of billionaires sitting around talking about, $1,000 bottles of wine and, investments that they're making. But if you can look past all that, it's actually some really they're all insiders. They literally have one foot inside all these tech companies. And I've really learned a lot. And for me, it's been really interesting to hear their take on a lot of the emerging technologies within AI. Chamath is one of the hosts. He's an entertaining guy. He's a no BS guy. But he made this comment at this VC conference, and I want to play it for you. And I hope that, actually, come to think of it, I probably should have made sure my audio came through, but I think you'll get the general gist of it. So here's him talking about where he thinks things are going next. So I'll make sure to crank up the volume, so hopefully you guys can hear this.
He told me this today, which I love. He told the story about refrigeration, and the story he tells is that the people and the person that invented refrigeration made some money. But most of the money was made by Coca-Cola, who used refrigeration to build an empire. And I view these large language models as refrigeration. Will there be some money made in it? I think so. But the Coca-Cola has yet to be built. And those are the companies that are really going to monetize it. And in order to monetize it well, here's a basic thing about machine learning that's worth knowing, which is if you take 1,000 of the same inputs and give it to Facebook and Microsoft and Google and Amazon, they'll all come up with the same machine learning model. But if you have one extra thing, one little ingredient that all of those other companies don't have, your output can be markedly different. It's like giving 2 great chefs 3 ingredients when you give the third chef 1 extra one. That person has the ability to do something very special.
That second part there, that metaphor with chefs and everything, although you could probably just use Chef GPT to do that, I suppose, right? But what he said there is really important down at even SMB or work groups within enterprise and for business decision makers. It's what data do we have that no one else has? What makes us special? And that is where the gold really lies. So you just have to assume anyone who has access to large language models, is a little bit different take on what he's saying, but it's the same logic. They're all going to have the same capabilities. They're all going to have the same access to knowledge. So what knowledge do you have? What data do you have that everyone else doesn't? And that's what's going to make you different. And these tools are going to be able to accentuate that advantage significantly. So that's probably my biggest advice moving forward. And to wrap this up with, to hopefully give a somewhat of a window for Q&A here, I just want to tell you from my perspective, this is Chris, the AI guy from today, telling you what I think is coming next. The biggest thing right now is asking data. It's called ask over data, ask over documents. That's chatbots where you can communicate with your own data. We see this all the time. It's a great use case. Everybody's doing it. You guys should do it too. The very least, an idea of this type of thing would be, instead of having a software application where you have to search and do queries against data, maybe you just put a chatbot UI and just let your users ask any questions that they want of the data and get narratives written back to them. That's the very least you could be doing from an interface upgrade standpoint. Additionally, documents. There's tons of data that's locked inside documents that you don't have that access to. It's not in databases, but maybe it's just locked in documents, PDFs, Word documents, whatever it is. No better time than now to be able to take those documents, do what's called vectorizing them, and then extract that intelligence and get that instantaneous real-time access to it immediately. That's what we're seeing with these asking to the documents, and that's what I'm referring to as resurrecting the dead data. The other thing that is really kind of the next big thing, skating to where the puck is going as far as I'm concerned, is the idea of creating these single sources of truth. You've heard these as data lakes or data ponds. before, but you can do this within your own organization, and the language model technologies and their tertiary supporting technologies make this very possible. You can take all of your data, get it into one spot, keep it in the silos, but bring it into a certain pool for evaluation, and you would be absolutely shocked and blown away by the intelligence that you can extract from it using language models and some of the tertiary tools to language models to bring intuition out of this data that you would have never even thought to ask. So right now, the big trend is asking data. I'm telling you that the next thing is the data can just tell you. And that has a lot to do with your organizational intelligence, taking inventory of who your users are, what their tasks are, what outcomes you're hoping for from them. And then the models can do the matching of that, extract very high level insights, and then route them to the appropriate individuals in real time. So that's the organizational intelligence and user model stuff. Specifically, in a post that came up for about 2 hours last week, and then OpenAI asked for it to be removed, OpenAI themselves, the leader in the clubhouse on language models, said that they're looking to make their models cheaper and faster. They already do have cheap and fast models, but their GPT-4 is a little slower and more expensive, so they're going to fix that. But this one here, the large context window, without getting into too much specifics on it, right now, you can only feed so much data into a language model and have it analyze it and respond to it. So for example, it's what's called the token limit. So if we look at it as a word limit, you're looking at 5,000 to 10,000 words. So if you have a document that's 5,000 or 10,000 words, you can literally feed it into a language model. It can analyze the entire thing. But for example, we work with trial attorneys out here in Newport Beach, California, where I live, and they wanted us to be able to evaluate the entire court transcripts of a trial that they're in the middle of. So we tried it out once. We found out that a 11-day court transcript is about 880,000 tokens, which is 10 times more than any of the language models offer right now. Although there's one open source one that does 100,000. But my prediction is possibly by the end of the year, if not within 12 months, we will have context of 1 million. So what this means is, if you can wrap your head around it, you can literally say, take every document that we've ever talked about this topic ever and tell me some insights about this. Or in the case of those trial lawyers, here's the entire transcripts, not only, pull out exact quotes that people made, but take these jury personas over here that we've created and tell us what they would think about something if somebody said it differently, for example, and what outcome might that have. That's the type of stuff that we're talking about with these massive data sets and these, like, the ability for these models to on the personas of something beside their own perspective. And some of the other stuff kind of fits in there. In short, I got some links that Paul has on some papers about asking with your data. We have a playbook out there for trusting these models for business, where I talk about a lot of the safeguarding and stuff I didn't really talk about here, but not because it's not important, but doing this safely and responsibly and accurately, and all the different tools that are currently available and in use that you don't have to wait around for. And then the last one that I mentioned about the powers of reasoning that these models have. So, and then finally, this was all a LinkedIn post that I did. Most of what I covered here today was covered in the, if you're waiting on AI, it might be too late. So those are all links that Paul has. So I wish I would have left some more time. I sort of do that all the time. I apologize, but I want to pause and let you guys bring up some comments or ask some questions about things I either did or did not cover.
Not a question, but just wanted to thank you, Chris. That was phenomenal.
Thank you. That really means a lot to me. That being able to talk to people about this stuff, I was kidding around before, but I really appreciate this opportunity. And to express that, I can tell you that my wife and I went on a vacation last year for a couple of weeks, and she pulled me aside after a few days in the hallway of some hotel we were at. And she goes, "Chris, I need you to stop talking to strangers about AI. You're freaking out." like literally stop it. And I get one glass of wine in me. This is what like my neighbors have to hear about. So I appreciate having a group that's interested or compelled, by this information. And really, while this tone might not be popular, that there are guardrails in place, there's safety in place. We are safe. Robots aren't going to nuke us. I feel like the Terminator movies did for this emergence of AI in public opinion what Jaws did for us swimming in the oceans back in 1972. It just kind of put that into our heads. And I promise you, I entered this with the same trepidation and skepticism, but now all I've seen is the guardrails, everything in place to do this safely and responsibly. And I'm living through the outcomes that I'm seeing businesses do, and it's absolutely amazing. It is by far the most fun and compelling work I've ever done in my almost 30 years of working with business and their data. So
I have a question. What school, what college or universities are preparing students or degrees for AI to be in the marketplace or in businesses or be part of it?
It's such a great question. Well, first off, the good news is the same type of ML ops type training and the coding, like the Python, background that's necessary, and a lot of the machine learning. Well, I'll give you a good anecdote. The data scientists that we work with here at iSolutions, the same guy, Dr. Michael Schuckers, who I wrote that paper with back in 2013, he also is still a professor. He still teaches machine learning. So he's in a very progressive school on the East Coast for machine learning, and they just started. He was doing language model work professionally before they were actually teaching it within his program. So the emergence of these, even in aggressive, machine learning schools, is just kind of happening in 2013. The more interesting part of it, though, is that the skills that you need to interact with these is not even code-based, it's human. It's literally plain English.
Oh.
I mean, it's amazing. So what I've actually found, probably one of the best success stories I can tell you, is that one of my neighbors here on our street, she was a journalism major from Berkeley, and she was like writing children's books, and doing like just writing things. She then pivoted and just kind of got a curiosity about AI and found out that everything she knew about, constructing sentences and pragmatics and the logic of how you use language actually made her an incredible prompt engineer, and completely pivoted. And like months later, now she's in a job that, I think she's making like, 50% more than she was making even before, working the hours that she wants to. And now she's an AI professional. It's incredible. And what she leveraged was a Berkeley journalism degree. The Berkeley part's impressive, but the journalism part is the thing that I think is most amazing. So really, we as humans, we have this more compelling relationship with the language than we ever had. And the best way I can illustrate that is by saying the models learned all this intelligence by hearing us talk and reading us speak. And through that was able to infer logic in the same way there Aristotle discovered syllogisms by listening to other people speak. And the language models have done that at orders of magnitude. So keep in mind that the code, the through line for that is language. So really, if I was looking at young people or even individuals within your organization who might be your next AI professional, look for those that have a great grasp or background on language and the construct of it, and understanding sort of pragmatics and, a little kind of logic thinking as well too. Those are going to end up being the ones, and they can teach themselves Python using ChatGPT. I would look for that type of talent more than I would look for coding experience, because the most experience anyone can have is 3 years in this. So they're maybe still in school, in a school that's not teaching that stuff. So something to think about there.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Patrick from Quest CE, and I just wanted to say that MSOE locally here in Wisconsin did launch their Bachelor of Science in Applied AI in 2019. And they've been having, they got a large grant, built a new 70,000 square foot building, and it's only focused on just AI. So
that
Milwaukee area seems to has a good leg up there.
Well, Patrick, not only am I delighted to hear that as a Milwaukeean at heart, and literally a Milwaukeean, growing up there, I'm rooting really hard for the Milwaukee area. There's a really interesting tech emergence that's happening there, and I'm all for it. I'm not surprised to hear that specific anecdote. I like a lot of what I'm seeing there, but this is the type of like really young, vibrant emergence of these of technologies that's happening. So that looks like an excellent place to be standing out the front door of, or hanging out in the parking lot of, if you're looking for some AI talent.
Right, I agree.
Chris, without giving away any trade secrets or proprietary data or anything, are there other compelling, kind of real life, I guess, case studies or projects? Like I think the lawyer, trial transcript thing is a great example. Like for us to kind of connect the dots from the, kind of the theoretical to where rubber meets the road type of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Of course, we've been talking, theoretically. The asking, chatting doc thing, I can tell you, like, for example, probably the most common thing we've done is like a couple that we just did in the last couple of weeks. HR department chats, taking your entire employee handbooks and your FAQs and your code of conducts and doing what's called vectorizing them and allowing your users to interact with them. Literally ask questions. What's our vacation policy? Do we have a 401k? Like really making interacting with data a lot easier. We do a lot of that type of chat stuff. We're even doing some replacing the standard interfaces where there's reports that, someone had to think of what the report structure was going to be many years ago, and they built it into your system. Now we're actually just integrating little like chat windows into applications so that users can find out insights from data that they never had before. We're doing, along the same lines, sticking with the chat stuff, like training models to understand like medical procedures and be able to ask questions and do training through these types of things. One of them that's kind of close to the generative thing that I think is an interesting anecdote is we were able to, there's a large enterprise up in that city north of us with those bad sports teams that we don't like, that unfortunately went through a lot of layoffs recently. And one of the layoffs was in their ad copyright departments. And so we were able to help them generate AI, generate product descriptions through AI. Now that sounds like a ChatGPT type thing, but the thing that's really interesting about it is after some of our early experiments, their marketing team came in and said, hey, I'm a little concerned that AI wrote these things. Are they consistent with our brand guidelines? And so we said, sure, what are those brand guidelines? And they literally gave us their brand guidelines, and we were able to build those into the model. So now everything that comes out of it actually runs through the brand guidelines, goes back and forth in that reflection thing, and then comes out as a perfect chef's kiss adaptation of whatever the corporate's brand guidelines are. Then legal heard that we had an AI that was potentially making promises on these product descriptions. And so they said, hey, actually, let's shut that down for a bit. We have all these things that we don't want to do. And we said, what are those things? And they gave us all sorts of documentation, and we built that in. Now, every one of these things goes through a legal check and actually makes recommendations and isolates specific things within the descriptions that might be harmful, even recommends different ways to say it that would not be, legally binding. So while that's generative, I think the real magic of it comes from how we're infusing this sort of corporate, tone and truth into these things as well. Additionally, we've been doing a lot of these implementations where we're going into businesses that are taking, pulling all the data into this single source of truth concept that we're talking about, and allowing visualizations and insights for specific users to be able to, be sent out through their corporate systems. It's a little bit more of a generic tone, but we're doing multiple types of iterations of those, doing some computer vision where we're generating, like a tabletop marketing advertisements based on just people doing text inputs. We're able to use computer vision to find, look for certain products within, ad copy or something like that, and identify things like that using AI. Trying to think of something that's a little bit off the beaten path there as well too. Focus groups, a film group out on the East Coast that instead of filming a movie and then showing it to focus groups, they're actually having us create focus group personas and feed the script to it and saying, hey, what do you guys think of Act 3? And then actually doing the script rewrites before they even shoot. So that's another one of those really cool, reasoning type implementations there. So, hopefully that kind of gives, I don't know, a bunch more of those kind of things. I would say, if you're looking for some inspiration, while we don't necessarily put our customers' stuff up on our YouTube. I do have a lot of other things that are intended to get you thinking about the capabilities of AI beyond just the generative AI stuff at our iSolutionsAI YouTube, which I think, Paul, you have that on your list. And I would say check that out as far as like, not necessarily seeing the implementations, but the tech behind it and some of the interesting stuff that we're doing. And a lot of those I even focus on ChatGPT and how you can experiment for yourself and do some stuff and kind of get to know it. And there's even a what is ChatGPT with some like beginner, like a 20-minute beginner course on introducing you to ChatGPT and how prompts work and some of the logic there. You can find that in addition to some of the inspiration of what's possible with some of these models.
Very cool. You appreciate this. We had in our earlier discussion today, we start talking about integration with POS systems. And I was immediately started thinking about what we were going to be doing here, in that whole idea of using that wealth of data to construct customer personas, as far as what does that look like, and kind of those internal models.
It's a huge observation, and I can give you a little idea of this if I bring it back to that fantasy football thing. So we're going to be deploying within the next month a ChatGPT plugin. So those of you that have had ChatGPT or even the ChatGPT Plus, that's the $20 a month version, you can load plugins. These are third-party plugins. It's basically the App Store, the iOS App Store, but for ChatGPT, which I'm very excited about because they have surpassed 12 billion page views, and there's over 200 million users worldwide. So I'm very excited to be one of the first 200 of those apps when we deploy this. But what it is it's just a silly fantasy football thing. Ask it fantasy football questions, and it goes to our machine learning model, and it extracts all our proprietary data. That's our moat, and actually answers those questions. You can actually take your favorite article off the internet and have it say, hey, this guy thinks he knows what he's talking about. Give it the BS test, and it will rewrite and actually point out areas where it agrees and disagrees based on the truth that's in the model, not just somebody's gut. And then what's interesting pertaining to the persona part is that when we onboard people after the free period of the summer is over and the football season starts, we're going to onboard people not only so they pay, but this is my part that I'm so excited about, is they're going to answer a bunch of questions about how long have you been playing this game? What other interests do you have? And, what's your age group? What are some of the other things that you like? Give us a narrative description about yourself and that type of thing. And so in our tests, we're able to answer questions for someone who's never played the game, where we can infuse a bunch of the rules in line. Or if someone says they're a big video game fan, we can go, oh yeah, well, this guy's going to be really good. It's sort of like facing the final boss or something in a video game. Like, we can actually tweak and personalize all of this information for whoever the user is. And we're doing it on the corporate side too. I think, Paul, I showed you and Vanessa that example where we're defining these user personas for every user of the AI systems. And then the data is actually tweaked and relevant to every single individual user of the system rather than everybody getting the same thing. So the user part is going to become not only huge, like you said, great example of POS and the consumer space, but also even at just the user interacting with the system, it's such a critical part of it. So much so that we have partnered with a marketing company here, because we realize that developing personas isn't just sitting down in front of your computer and typing some stuff out. There's actually a process to it. So we work in tandem with the marketing company to do all that development for us here.
I just thought of something with you're talking about user personas. Is there a way that, or any integrations with like Google Analytics to be able to, you have the information, you can actually see, what different users are, what types of websites they're going on. Is there a way where you can develop, or are there any applications out there where you can develop, better, more targeted marketing campaigns based on these personas that are showing interest in your product?
I believe, in fact, there are some services that are already leveraging the language model, the modern AI, to do that type of thing, but it's such a great example of it. As a matter of fact, just on Monday, we were onboarding a new customer who is solely focused on the SEO space, and they were talking about all this customer information they had, and we were saying, oh, that's great. You got transcripts of phone calls, and you have all this information about when you had positive outcomes. We're like, this is great. You can build models on all that information, and the language models can do incredible stuff with it. And now you can fine tune your messaging for all those individual, you know who the individuals are. We've never had more capabilities now to finely tune those messages to the appropriate parties than we do at this point. A lot, like, two things with SEO. The guesswork is gone now. And I'm worried maybe SEO might be gone soon as well too, because attribution is different. The having Bing and all the big search engines in Google now moving towards this chat interface, that means being on the first page isn't a big deal anymore. You have to be the top one, was what we're assuming is the one that gets the attribution. And honestly, it's not regurgitating just some clip that it found on a website. It's taking an amalgamation of a bunch of different findings that it had and actually coming up with its own original thoughts. And maybe there might only be one citation that comes out of that whole thing. So I don't have any ideas on what that's going to look like soon. I think even the big brains and those big search organizations are trying to figure that stuff out themselves. But your use case is an excellent one. I would say anywhere where you have a bunch of data about someone that you're trying to motivate or make an impression on, there's never been a better time to be able to actually figure out what they would do in certain search situations and leverage the predictive capabilities of these models to be able to give you an advantage.
Any other? Good. Thank you, Chris. As usual, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks everybody for joining in. It was a pleasure seeing you. So thank you so much. Take care,
Thanks for
Chris.
letting us join.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Chris.